right. And with that, I think we will go ahead and get started. So, welcome again to the Stewardship Network's monthly webcast for June 2024. So, a little bit about us to kick things off. ESN is a 501c3 nonprofit organization with an award-winning 20-year history. We are now serving 20 plus place-based TSN member communities from the Great Lakes to the Pacific Ocean. And our free TSN webcasts happen on the second Wednesday of each month at Eastern Time Zone's noon hour. Our mission is to connect, equip, and mobilize people and organizations to care for land and water in their communities. So I'd like to tell you a little bit more about each of those now. We connect the specialized knowledge we've collected from and for TSN member communities, and we share it as widely as possible. We equip, we remove hurdles for TSN member communities so they can pour thousands of annual work hours into their ecosystems. And we mobilize through our TSN member communities. We make collaborative ecological stewardship accessible for all. And speaking of mobilize, I must mention a very important and well-loved program that we are in just about the final stretch of. So the 2024 Stewardship Network Spring Challenge has been so wonderful so far. We started on April 10th, and it will be going through June 30th of this year. So I'd like to just dig into it a little bit more, as this will be my last webcast opportunity to talk to you about it before the challenge ends. So stewardshipnetwork.org/spring is the website that you can visit to learn more. New to this year is our reporting form accepts multiple categories in one entry, which we hope will save you a little bit of time. You can also directly upload your files and formats if desired. So even easier, if you're already tracking your stewardship hours, you can just upload that entire spreadsheet. And ESN Spring Challenge boosts, they're back. We made a splash last year in 2023, so we wanted it to come back in 2024. Some great prizes have already been claimed, but there's still plenty on the website for you to check out. And if you report on a weekly basis, you are entered into a drawing to receive those prizes. All of it counts. Reminder that volunteers are a huge part of this effort every year. Also, professional stewards are absolutely invited to submit any hours spent conducting stewardship in one of our many categories, just not admin, travel, and things like that. Again, on the website, you can learn about all of those different categories, and we even have an other category, so you can get a little bit creative, we'll say, with as long as it is within the realm of stewardship. So we are off to a great start this year. I would even say it might be the best year of early reporting that we've had, at least in my time with the Spring Challenge. We are right now at over 22,000 total hours of stewardship reported, which is totally awesome, significantly higher than we see at the same time in previous years. Over 8,400 participants have been a part of the challenge so far, getting those hours on the ground. And we know that the traditional late surge is coming. It is the field season. It is the busiest time of the year for most of us. But I do want to make a request on behalf of our wonderful colleague, Rachel Muley, who is responsible for tallying all of these hours. Please do not wait until 11:59 on June 30th to report all of your stuff. We would love for you to try to be as consistent as possible in these next couple of weeks. It helps us stay on top of how many hours we can expect. And also, we all know procrastinating, it'll be a little bit less stressful for you, not trying to fit all in at the very last minute. So yes, please keep reporting. We're so happy to see this momentum that we have right now, and we hope to continue it and to have the best year of the Spring Challenge yet. You may have noticed, if you have visited the website recently, that we have the all-new stewardshipnetwork.org. And I need to shout out Bob Zammit, who is behind the scenes on our tech team, who has been such an important part of this process. And I also want to shout out the Factory, who is the organization that we worked with to create this beautiful website. And we totally recommend them for all of your creative website service needs. So I want to show you a little bit more about this. Now, more reliable, more robust, more mobile friendly, and so much more. And we have all the love for our previous iterations of the website. We all know how things go in the tech world and how technology ebbs and flows. And with all the appreciation for the past iterations, we are really confident that this is an amazing new experience for all of you, and we are already getting a lot of great feedback from people about it. So please come on by and let us know what you think, the good, the bad, and the weird. It is only with your feedback that we will know all of the bugs that we can't possibly know about, as we're testing ourselves. So please do visit the website and let us know if you have any issues. And otherwise, we hope you enjoy it. So with that, I am so happy to introduce Julie Etterson from the University of Minnesota Duluth. And today the presentation is Minnesota Million Reforestation for Carbon Sequestration. So with that, Julie, you can share your screen and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the introduction and to be here with you wonderful people that are doing such amazing work. And today I'd like to tell you a little bit about the project that we have going on, which up until that introduction, I thought was of large scope and large timeline. But it's called Minnesota Million, and the goal is to do reforestation for carbon sequestration, among other things. And so I want to start from the beginning to recognize that this is a large collaboration with lots of partners involved. And the key players here are the University of Minnesota Extension, David Abaz, and the Nature Conservancy, Mary Hammes. But we have tribal partners and all kinds of governmental, nonprofit, youth organizations that are all working on this project. So I just want to say that it's a group effort. So we are motivated by climate change. We all know that the climate is warming and that it is due to human activity. There are pollutants that we're putting in the atmosphere that warm the environment. There are those that cool the environment, like aerosols that scatter light and also form nuclei of clouds, which also reflect light back into space. But adding it all up, we are increasing the temperature of the planet, and it is not due to sunspots or volcanoes. These sort of natural processes are adding noise to the pattern, but they are not contributing to the long-term trends. And so the biggest culprit is still carbon dioxide. There are other non-greenhouse gases, some of which are really important, like this bar here is methane. And like I said before, there are aerosols that have mixed effects, but to date, carbon dioxide is still the most important contributor to climate change, and that is where we're focusing our attention in this project. And our goal really is to reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And one simple way to do that is plant a tree. Trees take up carbon dioxide. A lot of the carbon gets sequestered in the plant body, and they release oxygen in the process. Another really important goal of this project, while we are planting trees, is to help facilitate resilience and adaptation in our forest composition so that the forests will continue to thrive with climate change. I mean, we can do nothing. And over the course of time, it's possible that we'll hit a threshold where there's really a lot of mortality on the landscape. New trees will come in. There's no doubt about that. But, or other plants, we can also accelerate change in forests by introducing species or populations of species that might be more well adapted to the changed climate that we're already experiencing. And another important goal for me as a college professor is to try to engage students and all young people in activities that helps combat their climate despair. It is serious. There was the landmark study that came out recently that showed more than 80% of young people are really worried about climate change. And, it's making them sad and afraid and anxious and angry and powerless, etc. I feel it like it's my responsibility to engage these young people in activities that do make a difference to help them, feel more optimistic about their future and empowered to make change. And one way, and what we're doing in this project is increasing forest cover. This is a gorgeous image that shows global forest cover presently on our planet. There's a lot of forest. It's gorgeous. But it is a third reduced from what it was before human population growth really started to expand. And that's important because trees are basically the lungs of our planet. Trees take up carbon dioxide, and then with the light of the sun, they create sugars, some of which is burned for plant growth, and a lot of which is just sequestered in the tissues of the plant. So that in the end, a tree is about half carbon. So the more that we can increase forest cover, the more we can sequester carbon, remove it out of the atmosphere and lock it away. But the trend is not going in the right direction, as I'm sure you all are aware of. This is the losses of forests in the last couple of decades. And there are some places where there's gains, they're shown here in blue, and there's some places there are losses and gains, but overall, forest loss is exceeding forest gains. And so this project really is focused down in the state of Minnesota. And so here we also still have a lot of forest, but we have half of what we used to have about 200 years ago. And like the global trend, we are also losing a lot of forest. So this is forest losses in the last couple decades. Some of these are due to fires, but a lot of it is sort of just nibbling along the edges of intact forests for the purposes of forestry. And so our goal here is to increase the gains. And here the gains are shown on white. And so there's not a lot. This is Wisconsin and this is Canada. And so our goal really is to put more white on this map. And there are a lot of opportunities to do that in the state of Minnesota, as shown on this map. So this is a great map that was put together by the Nature Conservancy. Everything in green is a little pixel where there's an opportunity for restoration. So what they did was they divided the whole state up into pixels and then ranked them according to about 12 different criteria. And so obviously, if it's already forested, it's not a high priority. If it is not forested, then it is a higher priority for restoration. If it's actively farmed, it's a low priority, but if it's an abandoned field, then it's a higher priority. And it's easier to work on state or public land. Private land got a lower priority score. This is just for example. So considering all of those criteria, what is shown on this map is the top 20% of pixels where forest reforestation could occur. So there's 2 million shown on this map, and our goal is to reforest half of them by the year 2045. So that's the long-term goal for this project that we're calling Minnesota Million. And it's a tall order. We'll have to plant 56,000 acres of trees per year, but if we can, we'll draw down 1.6 million tons of carbon dioxide annually, and that's equivalent to about 328,000 cars. Ultimately, we could draw down 20% of Minnesota's annual CO2 emissions through this natural climate solution. Okay, that's not the whole answer, but it is something that we can do, and it's something that everyone can do in order to feel empowered about making change to reduce climate change. So increasing carbon sequestration is one thing. Increasing resilience of our forests and maintaining forest cover is another. And there are some parts of Minnesota where one would argue we're kind of already at the threshold stage. This is one of our most popular national or state parks right on the shore of Lake Superior. The land has been managed for secondary growth, aspen and birch. And now what's happening is as the old trees die, new ones are not recruiting again across the landscape. And like so many of these things, it is hard to link it to climate change directly, but climate change doesn't weaken trees, especially late season drought, which we've been having more of in our state. And then it's more susceptible to a native beetle, which is actually causing the demise of the trees. And so we'd like to bring in species and populations that are resilient to climate change and accelerate this change. This is often referred to as assisted migration. And it's really important to do that in the state of Minnesota because climate change is really extreme here. Already, there are 7 counties where average annual temperature is twice the global average. It's just like stunning. And in winter, it's even worse. 2/3 of our counties have more than 2 degrees Celsius climate change. And so it's in this context that we think, well, maybe more southern sources of plant material may thrive as climate continues to change in our area. So, but there are multiple ways that people think about moving, translocating populations with climate change. And I just want to go over those quickly. One is assisted species migration. And so here there's a little green dot at the bottom. That's the geographic range of a rare species. And to save it, it was transplanted long distances away. And so this is moving species beyond their current range and by a large amount. And this was done by the Torrey Botanical Society to save Pinus torreyana. It worked, but this is the highest risk strategy because you could inadvertently be creating an invasive species by moving it outside of its range where it doesn't have enemies and other controls on its population growth. Another idea for assisted migration is assisted range expansion. And so here the green shows the geographic range and the arrows show where plantings are expanding the range a little bit. And this is also actively being done, for example, in British Columbia with ponderosa pine. And then finally, there's assisted population migration. And in this case, here's again the geographic distribution. And these arrows just show populations, all the same species, but from a little bit more southern origin, moving in the direction that climate is changing. So this is the least risky approach and is also being done by the U.S. Forest Service in Western states, for example, with Western larch. And this is what we're proposing to do in the state of Minnesota. So the third type, assisted population migration. But sort of a long time ago, we started thinking about, well, is this really going to work? And so I'm going to show you a little bit of data from an experiment that I did with the Nature Conservancy to test this question. I guess it's more than 10 years ago now, but lots of folks involved in planting this experiment and also collecting data over the years. So we were working in Northeast Minnesota, and the amount of climate change informed our plans. So this is a map of how much climate change has already occurred in the state of Minnesota. And so we can think about, well, how far has that climate space shifted across the state? And it turns out it's about 240 kilometers. And so if you look at the vegetation where that climate originated, it's like deciduous forest. There's prairie in Minnesota, there's mixed boreal, and then there's this band of deciduous trees. And those are maybe the plants that are going to do better with climate change. Of course, we looked at models, and there are models out there that show that boreal species are likely to decline, that temperate species are likely to increase. And so based on this information, we decided to work on white pine, bur oak, and red oak. And we also were working within the confines of state policy. So this is the Minnesota's DNR seed zone map. And so the current rules are, if you want to do a restoration in zone 104, then you need to collect seed from zone 104 and plant it back in to the same site. But with assisted migration, we're thinking about maybe we want the population to come from zone 105 or even further south. And so this is where we started about, I don't know, 2011, 2012. We planted 110,000 trees from seed zone 104 and 105 into 2,000 acres that were logged. And so these blue dots are showing the actual sites where we did the planting. And then a smaller number were in a formal experimental design, and they were marked so that we could revisit them year after year. And the measurements I'm going to show you about today were taken in 2018, but we are in the process of measuring these trees again in 2024 right now. So the basic question is, do seedlings from the more southern seed zone 105, shown here in speckled, survive and grow better or as well as the local material from zone 104? In other words, does assisted population migration work? And so I'm going to just show you a few pieces of data, 4 maybe. So the first one is survival. And so here is a graph of survival. This is bur oak, this is red oak, from the north, 104, and from a little bit further south, 105. And so I think the first takeaway message here is that survival is really high. So after 6 years, we still had more than 90% survival of the seedlings that we planted. And so these species are in this area, but they're at the northern edge of the species range. So these deciduous species, even though they're more of a minor constituent of the forest composition, do extremely well when planted north. And for red oak, the southern seed source actually had higher survival, significantly higher survival than the northern one. The trend was the same thing for bur oak, but it was not significant. And so some indication really early on that assisted migration will work as measured by survival. But we can also look at other things, like one of the things people talk about a lot is phenology, or the timing of events that happen in the life of a plant. And so what I'm going to show you here is the number of days from the time the buds burst until in the fall, the last leaf turned brown. And so we had dedicated undergrads who were going out there every week and measuring this. So this is the number of days that the plants retain their leaves. And here you can see that there are big differences between the northern source material and the southern source material for both bur oak and red oak. And so the punchline here is that the southern source material burst their leaves out earlier and hang on to their leaves for longer, which perhaps allows them to gain more carbon over the growing season. How about growth? Well, that's actually a little bit more of a complicated story that shows really how responses to climate change are species specific. So again, bur oak and red oak from the north and the south, this is growth in centimeters per year over the first 6 growing seasons. And again, there are differences between the northern and the southern seed source, but maybe not quite as clean as an interpretation as in the last data. Okay, this is what we expected. The southern seed source of red oak grew faster than the northern one did. That makes sense. But bur oak was the opposite. But one thing that we had to scratch our head and think about quite a bit is that bur oak at the juvenile stages allocates a lot more of its energy to below ground structures than above ground structures. We were only measuring above ground. And so just for example, the bur oaks invest about twice as much to roots versus shoots relative to red oak. And so I haven't gotten a volunteer yet to dig a plant out to verify that this is true, but this is what we think is going on. And we also went to the trouble of measuring how much water is moving through the trees. And so we only did this at one site because it was real fussy to put a evapotranspiration chamber over the whole tree. And then you can measure how fast the plant is moving water by measuring the relative humidity inside the cage. But what we found here too is definitely differences between species and also definitely difference between populations of species. So we'll start with bur oak. This is evapotranspiration on this axis in July, August, and September, and again for northern and southern plants. And here you can see that the southern plants were moving significantly more water through their bodies in July. And this was also true in August and September. So that's a nice story. But similar to the last piece of data that we looked at, red oak's different. Red oak has a water conservation strategy. So the southern ecotype closes up its stomata and saves water. And that was true in July and August and September. So species differ, but also where you collect your seed material really matters. It matters for survival, phenology, water use, and probably carbon gain. So, okay, why don't we just do assisted migration? I mean, this suggests that it is an effective way of managing our forests. Well, the primary answer is that in the state of Minnesota, we simply don't grow enough trees. This is a picture of the Bedora State Nursery run by the DNR, and they can't grow enough seeds to do the kind of planting that we have envisioned. And so Minnesota Million is like a call to action. And I'm going to step you through the processes. First, we're collecting seed based on the best science that we have available about what will happen in the future and what species will thrive. A lot of that work is being done by climate impact service volunteers at the moment, but also we're engaging youth groups in seed collection. And of course, we have some paid people doing it too. Those seeds are then distributed out to farmers and nurseries in our area that are, stepping up. And so this is one example, Chelsea Morning Farm, growing some seedlings for our project. UMD, the University of Minnesota Duluth, is also starting a student-run nursery on some land we have on campus. And so overall, we have about 40 growers are shown in maroon here. And then below is all the places where we've been collecting seeds. And then we have people that are, doing training of the farmers so that they can succeed. And then they sell their seedlings to restoration organizations, and then we can reinvest in the project. And we've got a nice infusion of cash from the USDA Climate Smart Commodities program to do this work. And then once the trees are sold, they are planted by restoration organizations. And then my part is studying planting success, and using that information to feed back in to how we're managing this project. And so just in my last few minutes, I'm going to show you 3 research questions that we're working on right now. So I have a little bit of preliminary data. One is just like, how far should we be moving populations to assure that we haven't moved them too far, that they're adapted to climate change? And so this is one experiment that I've been doing with undergrads, collecting seed in central Minnesota. As of right now, just red oak, but we're planning on expanding that. And they're planted into these 3 sites, so each a little bit more northern than the others. And we can look at whether or not we've gone too far. And the answer to that is definitely no. So after 2 years, we have still about 83% survival and no difference between the sites. So we haven't gone too far. We could go further maybe. And then you can also look at how the populations differ. And here there are some differences between the populations. Basically, plants that are from further west have slightly lower survival than those from further east. And that makes sense. There's a strong aridity gradient as you go from forested habitats in eastern Minnesota out onto the prairie. The second question is, when we're growing all these seedlings, should we be inoculating them with mycorrhizal fungi? And if so, where should that come from? So if you, just as a reminder, plants, almost all plants, form relationships with fungi that are mutualistic. The fungi, all their little mycelium that's growing underground, draws in water and nutrients that are delivered to the plant, and in exchange, they receive sugars that the plants have made through photosynthesis. So this is a really important relationship. This is just a picture of a white pine seedling with and without mycorrhizae growing in its roots. And so we are wondering whether our seedlings would have greater success, enhanced growth, for example, if we inoculated them with, either inoculum that we collected ourselves from nature, which I guess I thought might be the best relative to commercial products that are available for purchase. But here's some preliminary data. I think I got these in the wrong order. Here is height at 12 weeks. This is just for yellow birch, comparing a control group that has no inoculation and a commercial source of inoculant and a native source. And what you can see is the commercial source is superior, at least at this point in time. And that could be because the native inoculant is bringing along, pathogens, and it's just made out of soil and roots and mycorrhizae. both bacterial and potentially also fungal pathogens. So we are doing a little bit of work, I'm going to go backwards here, directly collecting fungi, isolating out isolates in Petri plates, and then growing up large quantities of native mycorrhizae to see if that's possible and whether or not it works better. And then finally, the third question is simply like, how much inoculum is out there naturally in sites that have different disturbance histories? I mean, does it get wiped out when the soil is burned in a fire? Does it degrade if a forest is clear cut? Or if there's a big windstorm and lots of wind throw, or, in maybe a gravel road that you want to restore, or a golf course. And so I have a graduate student, Shannon Meehan, who is studying this. And one of her sites is the Greenwood Fire site. And this is a Forest Service burn intensity map. And so she basically is using little test plants, kind of like bait plants, and sticking them out into nature in areas where there's high burn intensity and where there was low burn intensity, and trying to determine whether or not there is natural inoculum that is infecting the roots of the plants. This is what the infections look like when the mycorrhizae are interacting with the roots and of white pine and red oak. And here's just some preliminary data. So this is the percent of roots that are colonized by mycorrhizae. And you can see that for white pine anyway, there is less colonization in high burn areas, comparing these white box plots, than there is to low burn areas. But for red oak, it just doesn't matter, at least in the first year, and we're collecting this data again for the second year. Okay, so Minnesota Million is a call to action. Our goal is to reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but while we're doing that, we also want to facilitate change in natural communities and also get everyone involved, but young people in particular involved in ways where they're just not complacent. There's actually something they can do. They can see its value on the ground and feel like they're empowered to take a step towards reducing climate change in our environment. And so with that, I will thank you very much for your attention, and I am happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Julie. I really appreciate it. That is such an incredible project, and there's so much to think about and chew on with that. I want to encourage everybody in the chat that are attending to please share your questions via the Q&A, and you can feel free to use the chat for any for any comments or resources that you might have. So one question I had, Julie, is wondering, you had put up some stats about the carbon sequestration that is possible with this program, and you had talked about the 56,000 acres per year for 18 years. And I was curious, is that number for carbon sequestration at the maturity of the forest, or how does that kind of carbon sequestration change over time as the seedlings develop, and just curious about that timeline.
That's a great question. And that is at the end point of the grant. And so that's taken into account the amount of carbon sequestration that will happen over the course of time, if we can meet that planting goal.
Got it. That makes sense. And then for folks that aren't aware, and I'm forgetting exactly, but over the life cycle of a tree, I think it sequesters less. Is that right? When it's younger, and then when it's more mature, it sequesters more, or how does that change over time?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. the rate of carbon sequestration is higher in a juvenile plant, but the total amount that is sequestered is higher in an adult, just because the body size is so much bigger.
That totally makes sense. Okay, interesting. Cool, cool. That's good to know. Great. And then, so the whole concept of the species and range and population migration is so interesting to me. And one of the things that I was thinking about is, so on a basic level, we can understand that the idea here is planting, trees that, for the climate that they will experience going forward, right? So from the southern going north. And I'm curious about if you've studied the larger ecosystem impacts of those changes. I know that in some cases, for example, these types of trees are probably already existing in the areas where you're planting them. But just out of curiosity, is that ever something that you think about where what are the potential unintended impacts of changing the composition of a forest to the local,
Yeah,
organisms that live there? Yeah.
that's right. That's such a great question. And, I've been tiptoeing around this issue for 30 years, thinking about it. Um, and of course, changing a species composition will affect every other thing that lives there. The animals, the forest understory species. That's true. But the alternative is, in some cases, a lack of trees, which also has a huge impact on other animals that use the forest or lack thereof,
Hmm.
and the understory plant species. Climate change is already having visible and measurable impacts on forest composition, at least in the state of Minnesota. And they've been well documented. Change is happening. We can, you know, wait and allow natural processes to occur. I think that, uh, I guess personally, I have come to accept that the forest composition is going to change, and that I would prefer to have forests rather than not. The
Hmm.
long-term climate models suggest that where we are fully forested in Minnesota would become oak savanna over
Hmm.
the long term. And as long as we can retain some forest cover, then I think that if we can get our carbon habit under control, we can gradually revert back,
Hmm.
perhaps, to what it
Hmm.
was. The
Right.
other thing that I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about and studying is whether or not there are, like climate refuges, even within the state of Minnesota, where boreal species can persist,
Hmm.
and some remnants of the boreal animal and plant composition that goes along with that community type can exist. And so in northern Minnesota anyway, those areas are sort of like the deep ravines where there are rivers that run into Lake Superior. They're
Hmm.
shadier, it's cooler. And so there could be strongholds of boreal habitat that are retained, even if we do assisted migration in the areas where already we see mortality across the landscape.
Hmm. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And it's also, I imagine, quite different introducing tree species to a new ecosystem as opposed to a flying insect that might have, unintended consequences and can go, you know what I mean? It's you have to be very careful with any of those introductions. But as far as a tree goes, you plant it and it is there. So it's a little bit different than some of these
Yeah.
other things that we've done before. Um, so and
Although
I
I
oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Although I have to say, I mean, I actually am a plant geneticist,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
now this is my passion project at the end of my career. And so I do think about, when you move in, even populations
Yeah.
different species, you're altering the genetic landscape. But I guess I've just come to terms with the fact that it's, you know, it's worth the intervention.
Yeah, yeah, that's an important distinction for sure. Yeah. So we have a question from the audience, and that is, can you speak to the cost of this method of carbon sequestration versus alternatives such as underground sequestration, given the trees return their CO2 to the atmosphere at the end of their life cycle?
Hmm. Yes, that is a great question. I'm afraid I don't have a great answer. That's a little bit on the edge of
Hmm.
my
Hmm.
sphere of knowledge, but yes, it is definitely true that when a plant dies, and it decomposes, then that carbon is released back
Hmm.
out into the atmosphere. But by creating healthy forests, we also create opportunities for the plants to recruit, to grow the next generation.
Hmm.
And in
Hmm.
fact, actually, in that experiment, there are a few trees that have already started producing seed naturally. And so
Hmm.
there's the potential that natural recruitment will compensate for the losses that inevitably will occur.
Hmm. Right,
And
because, oh, go ahead, sorry.
no, and just the big gains are from no trees to the presence of trees.
Hmm.
And then it's natural maintenance through
Hmm.
natural cycles of mortality and germination.
Right, right. And because in reality it's the net gain in tree coverage is really what we're talking about here. So there will inevitably be loss of the trees and decomposition as well as growth of new trees. But as long as you're increasing the net amount of forest cover, that seems to be where the sequestration gains come into play. Great question about the cost, and obviously that's something for all of us to consider. But go ahead.
So one other thing I want to say though is I feel like the urgency of this issue is all hands on deck. If it means artificial methods of sequestering carbon, anything that we can do to limit the amount that comes out of smokestacks,
Hmm.
electric vehicles. I mean, it all is part of the solution, and this is just one small part.
Hmm. Hmm. I totally appreciate that. It's definitely a both and a both and in
Yep.
terms of the solutions. And to that point, maybe just a few more, and then we'll get into the outro here. I saw towards the end you were talking about the system for the financing, right? And so there's initial investment required in
Mhm.
producing the seedlings and incentivizing that, and then you go down the line, and then you have the potential sale of these seedlings to stewardship organizations, which would then put money back into this system of producing more, right? um
That's great.
and I don't want to go again, too far beyond what your expertise is, but I'm just thinking with regards to the stewardship network and also perhaps other folks in attendance today. um Part of or part of what is necessary for that system to work is the continued funding of those stewardship organizations to be able to afford to pay into that program. And so obviously you are understanding that there is investment needed from the outside, which ideally comes from stewardship organizations who are already
Mhm.
purchasing these things or have a vested interest in doing stewardship. That's what they get funding for. But
Mhm.
just a comment, or if you have any thoughts on it, the other part of that is, so it's not only, funding to actually initiate this program, it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle, but only if those stewardship organizations are funded sufficiently to be able to purchase those seedlings.
That is absolutely true. And we've been fortunate in that the Nature Conservancy, at least up until now, has been willing to buy everything that we make.
That's great. Hmm.
But we are building capacity every year. And so this year, for example, we're selling, or the trees are being delivered for sale to the soil and water conservation districts that have spring tree sales. So those will go directly to private individuals. We are also selling to state forest. And so, yes, I appreciate your point. And I wish that I could make it possible that all organizations that do such great work like yours had the funding they need. That's an important consideration, but we're going to have to rely upon the state purchasing
Mhm.
some of the trees and perhaps the Forest Service and also just private individuals.
Yeah, yeah. No, of course, and I mean it's all everyone plays a role, right? So certainly, only we can only all control so much of our certain piece of the puzzle, but really appreciate that, and I think just helpful for the narrative that we tell, right, about this and other related projects is like it is an interwoven ecosystem of organizations and financial kind of structures that allow for something like this to exist, and that initial investment is super important and the production is super important, and empowering stewardship organizations to be able to purchase those, it all just feeds into itself and hopefully in certain ways becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. um, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much, Julie. I really enjoyed talking to you, and the work you're doing is absolutely incredible. I'm very inspired by hearing the talk, and I hope that others are too. I'm sure that we could keep going. Um, another thing, maybe I'll just mention it very briefly before we end here, because I don't. I'm sorry if I missed it, but I don't know how much I saw specifically about this in the talk, and I can imagine it to a degree, but thinking about that combating climate despair and the engagement of youth in this process. And I was just curious if you could elaborate a little bit about that. Like, I don't know if you have dug into like, the research on that, or if you have collaborators that, are experts in environmental psychology or whatever else that are involved in that, or just could you maybe expand a little on how the project engages with youth and
Yeah.
combating climate despair?
So at present, the primary way that youth are involved is in the seed collection process. Youth organizations, clubs, are involved in that. We have done some plantings at local elementary schools. We're really at early days, but we hope to do more of that kind of thing. I mentioned the tree nursery that is just starting this spring at the UMD Land Lab.
Mhm.
Um, so that's really exciting. I am doing, I don't even want to say this out loud, but I'm doing a small experiment on the people who are working with me so far,
Mhm.
doing
Mhm.
before and after study, following the same format of the
Mhm.
data that I showed about this 2021 study, looking at whether or not engagement in this project has a measurable effect on
Mhm. Mhm.
people's feelings about climate change.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think it's an important thing to study. And it's a little bit out of my area, but in collaboration with colleagues in other departments, I hope to be able to also demonstrate that this project has an impact. At the land lab, they're doing the living tree part, but they're also
Mhm.
doing a dead tree part, which is using biochar, which is a method of capturing carbon in dead tree matter in the context of agriculture. And
Mhm.
so, yes, I think it's important that we not only are aware of it, but are also doing things that effectively uh,
Mhm.
influences uh, the people who are our target audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm also thinking I can only imagine and don't want to make assumptions, but stewardship organizations purchasing these trees and doing volunteer work days to get them planted and working with local youth organizations and schools and all of that stuff. And we see that, with the stewardship network through our spring challenge and through all kinds of things. Planting is a category in the spring challenge, so we see people doing that. We just did a really incredible hazelnut initiative where we were distributing a bunch of those and having people plant them. So absolutely a lot of opportunities that I can see throughout this whole process for folks to get involved. Well, with that, I will make my transition into the outro slide. So again, thank you so much, Julie, for your
You're welcome.
presentation. I so appreciate it. Um, so for all of the folks out there listening, we would love for you to become a regular. So please do. You can register for upcoming webcast episodes. It's always on the second Wednesday of the month, and it's at the Eastern Time Zone's noon hour. And we'll send you a morning reminder email to let you know that it's coming up. So we have in July of this year, we're doing Growing Towards Equitable Urban Forest Stewardship with Christine Carmichael from Fair Forest Consulting. Next in August, we have Stewardship is Climate Action with Denise Keel of the Michigan Climate Action Network. And then we have in September, Rethinking Kirtland's Warbler Conservation with Bill Rapai, Kirtland's Warbler Alliance. So again, you can visit stewardshipnetwork.org, sign up for one or all of these sweet upcoming webcasts. We encourage you to beat the June 30th deadline for the Spring Challenge reports. Please report early and often if you can. We super appreciate it. And feel free to peruse the fancy new website while you're here. And, just let us know if you have any issues or let us know if you love it. We would love to hear your feedback. So with that, thank you all so much. We appreciate you being here, and we will see you next month.